201st meeting of the Audit Committee of Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, November 2nd, 2021 at 7:30. Roll call, please.
All right, we'll note the trustees Wabi, Watson, Wilson, Fair, and Evans are in attendance.
Can I get approval of minutes, the 200 meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments by the chair?
Doesn't look like from chair or audit chair. If I may, we'll move to the next item, which is a presentation by Clifton Larson Allen, who are our external or financial auditors, and are going to present the annual audit package for the year. Hope, is that you? Hope, can you hear me? Hey, Hope, I see that you're on. Are you muted? Even with my glasses, I can't see them.
For any of y'all?
Are we hopeless?
You got any auditors that can hear you?
Andrew, can you hear me?
I think we have them muted.
Okay, can we unmute Hope and Andrew? Can you come help somebody? All right, technical difficulties. All right, Hope and Andrew, hold on just a second. Try which again?
See if Hope's on.
Do you have a phone number for Hope?
Let me find it. You thinking they can't hear?
They should be able to hear us, right?
Can we give her a ring, Tim?
Yes, if you have her phone number.
Yeah.
If we need to have her call in, we can dial in.
You guys asking if they can hear us? Is that what you-
Marion's calling her. I'm assuming they can hear us.
Hello?
There we go.
Is that you, Hope?
Good morning.
Good morning, Hope. Hope has been restored. Give us just 1 second. Or is everything? You guys are good over there now?
She can hear us.
And you can hear us, Hope?
Yeah, I think that's.
I don't think I'm checking this thing.
Oh.
Oh.
Well. Okay. Kind of engineer.
They're civil, they're worthless. No.
We've got an engineer as a head of IT. She's not picking up. I'm trying.
Can you guys hear me? This is Hope Wheeler.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hope, can you?
No, I see Marion tried to call me just now. I was on Do Not Disturb, and then Jean just emailed, no, I cannot hear Tim. Not sure if you can hear me.
Can you call her back?
Yeah. They cannot hear us. Hey, Hope, hi, this is Marion. Hey, we can hear you. Obviously, you can't hear us. So,
It'd be easier just to have her call into this, to our line. We can send her the.
Is it us?
you want us to,
Mute it.
we can,
Oh.
I guess you guys could call in over the phone. I don't know if that would help.
Is the phone on over there? Tammy, it is. Can you dial it in? I think we're gonna need to use the phone, please.
Hang on for a minute. We think we're gonna just switch to the phone. Okay, I'm gonna keep you on until we get set up. Is there a number that they need to call?
Yes, I'm gonna try to find it.
Okay, let me give you a phone number. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Welcome to the meeting. Please enter your conference code followed by the pound or hash sign. If you are the leader, press star now. Please enter your...
Tammy, can you give me the number? Like,
To start or join your conference, press 1. You will now be placed in a conference. After joining the call, to record the conference for those who may miss this call, or for future playback, press star 2.
We're getting a phone number for you guys, so hang on for just a minute.
oh, Hope, I'm gonna email it to her. All right, I just sent her the number, so.
Okay, Tim
let's
just
see if
sent
she got
you
it.
the number. Did you email it, Tim?
Yeah. Hold on, you know, what, let me take a picture of it just so I got it. Yeah, I gave her
Okay,
this and
she
this,
has
right?
it. So can you forward that to Andrew as well?
Wait, are you asking me to forward it?
Okay,
She can probably forward it better. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Here, bye. Get a disconnect and call in here. Several times. A couple of times they come in. Very good.
Hope, is that you?
Hello, it's me.
Hooray!
Okay, folks, don't change anything, we're going from here. Guys, don't change anything, we're going.
Are we on?
Please don't do anything. Camera,
Tammy,
camera,
Are we
please
on?
don't do anything, we're starting.
You can,
Okay,
but
let's
they
just,
can't, they can't do it.
they being the public,
all right. Apologize, trustees. We'll need a few more minutes.
Can't we switch that back on, because they could hear us before, I'm assuming, right? Right. Okay.
So are we doing anything differently than we've done for previous meetings? Were you on the YouTube?
Yeah.
So- I know, but if they can hear us on YouTube, then the public can hear us. That's what the
Yeah.
public's listening
do
through.
we know if the public can hear us?
That's what I'm,
Does that mean he's checking, is that what he just said?
Yeah.
I can't tell.
yeah, so all of our,
Let's start from scratch.
well, the public can hear what we're saying now.
You're sure now they can?
I just
Can you guys-
logged into the YouTube channel, and I just heard us talking.
Do we know if they could hear us when we started originally?
Yes.
They could, so we don't have to repeat anything we started. Okay.
Here, let's just press
So you
speak
guys-
there a minute.
Can anyone on Teams hear us?
I mean, I don't think there's anybody on
There's no
Teams.
way you can hear it.
Oh, good, thank
Well,
you.
they can hear you through the phone, through the phone,
Oh,
camera.
shoot.
Yeah,
So it doesn't matter, as long as they can hear it on YouTube.
Yep.
We don't have anybody else outside entity, right,
correct.
for any of the groups? Rich, you don't have an outside person?
No.
All right, are we ready to start?
We're okay?
All right, sorry about that, everybody. Hope, are you ready to present the annual audit package?
I am ready. You will do anything to liven up my report, right, Tim?
Whatever it takes.
Okay, this is Hope Wheeler here, and I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen, and happy to be here this morning to present the results of the June 30, 2021 audit. Also on the line is Andrew Zabel, a manager in St. Louis with CLA also. So, Tim, can you share, is my presentation up for you guys to see?
Yes, it is. And we have somebody who can, Janice will page through for you if you just kind of let her know what slide you're on.
Okay, if you just go ahead and jump a couple slides to the executive summary. Going to start there. So just explaining here the scope of services, and our services are to issue an opinion on the annual comprehensive financial report, or the ACFR, and also issue an opinion on your federal expenditures, your federal funding. Those are called the single audit reports. There we report over internal controls over financial reporting and compliance with the federal requirements applicable to each major program. So we go through each major program. We go through your federal expenditures and then determine which major programs we're required to test each year. Then we also, our scope of services includes an agreed upon procedures report required by the state of Missouri in regards to Missouri solid waste management requirements. We also give an opinion on your project expenditure report. That relates to loan drawdowns, bonds and loan drawdowns, and spending those monies on specific projects. Then we also give an in relation to opinion, meaning in relation to our opinion on your annual financial report. We also issue an opinion related to that on a separately issued statement we call other supplementary information, and you guys call that internally your fund statement. So it's really on your budgetary basis of accounting. And then lastly, as part of our services, we are required to provide a communication to the governing board. We did that in the planning phase and now doing it here in the final phase. And there is a separately issued written report for that, but I'm going to go over it here with you orally today also. The status of the audit, I would say 95% complete. The overall audit of your annual financial statement, or the ACFR, that is completed, and that is available for you. We have issued that. We've also issued our opinion on those separate fund statements, your budgetary basis statements, and the federal single audit reports. The only piece that is really still open, there are two pieces. The audit on the project expenditures, the spending of the bond and loan drawdowns, that is 95% complete. The audit work is complete, and the report is just really going through final review on your end to make sure everything looks okay in your finance department, and then we're ready to issue that report. The last piece that's open, sometimes this piece takes a little longer, and that's the agreed upon procedures report. It's actually the simplest piece of all this, but we're waiting on a letter back from the state of Missouri in order to complete that. That'll be very simple. Don't expect any issues or exceptions in that report, and that should be hopefully issued here in the next couple of weeks. Then, just to share the results of those audit procedures, the good news, the source of all of our work over the past few months is that we issued an unmodified opinion on your annual financial statements and your fund statements. While unmodified doesn't necessarily sometimes sound like a positive thing, it is. It means we made no modifications to our opinion, no exceptions, no scope limitations. Otherwise, in layman's terms, a clean opinion on your audit report that this is, in all material respects, in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Same is true with the opinion on the federal awards, your federal spending. That was an unmodified opinion on compliance with the major program we tested and on your internal controls over compliance. So no modifications to our opinions. The last section there, in addition to the unmodified opinion, we didn't have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we found as a result of our audit procedures that are required to be communicated in writing to you as the audit committee or governing board and management. So no written findings to share. So great news there. Jumping to the next page, I just tried to flip it myself. I can't do that. Next slide is, I mentioned the governance communication requirement. This here, these couple of pages summarize the requirements that were, the different topics, I should say, that we're required to share in this communication. So we've just kind of highlighted them here, and we'll go over them quickly. One, there weren't any material uncertainties. Sometimes there can be going concerns with an audit. No material uncertainties were noted as part of this audit process. We had no disagreements with management that we'd want to share with you as an audit committee in the audit process. No difficulties encountered during the audit process. Once again, happy to be here reporting, sharing our opinion just a few months after year end. A lot of work goes into getting everything prepared for us and ready to audit in a quick time frame. As I mentioned, we had no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. There were no other written communications provided to management other than what I've shared for you in the scope of services. We did share a few oral communications, some minor internal control suggestions or other recommendations that we had with the management group. There were no significant unusual transactions that we wanted to point out and share with you as an audit committee. We did not note any fraud or illegal acts in our audit process. And then we did want to point out that there was the adoption of a couple of new accounting standards or government accounting standards, GASBs. GASB 84 and 97 were kind of jointly implemented this year. That did make a change. If you compared your financial report from last year to this year side by side, you would see a fairly significant change there by the addition of a couple of new statements in your main financial statement. This new standard required your defined benefit plan to be shown as a separate statement in your in this financial statement. They've always had separately issued financial statements, separately issued audits, but now the defined benefit plan is required to be shown in your overall MSD financial statement. Then the other standard that was implemented was GASB 89. That relates to accounting for interest on long-term debt. And this was a big change. You used to have to capitalize that and put it on the balance sheet with your capital assets. Well, the accounting standards changed that, and now you expense that interest as it's incurred. Just note there, too, on the bottom of that slide that there is a new standard coming up next year, fiscal year 22. This is making a lot of noise out in the accounting world. It's GASB 87 with leases. You don't necessarily have a significant number of leases, but those that do, this will have a significant impact on them because you have to change the way you account for leases. That's something that is being analyzed currently, I know, by the finance. We can assist if there are any questions in that area. Then on the last page of the presentation, just continuing with these required communications in the governance letter, we did not propose any adjusting entries of significance, so nothing that was a adjustment that was posted and nothing that was a past adjustment or small enough to consider but not recorded. So no past adjustments either, or unrecorded adjustments from our perspective that we found. We did not note any non-compliance to share with you. And then lastly, just mentioning that we hope in this audit process we were able to provide some value-added feedback with some oral recommendations, with some changes we suggested last year in the cash flow preparation process. And then, as I mentioned before, we're available to help with any of the upcoming new standards, like the lease standards, and we did aid with some of our implementation tools with the implementation of GASB 84 and 97. So overall, just to summarize, audit process went well. Happy to deliver here in a timely manner your annual financial report. Clean opinions, no adjusting entries, and no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, no written findings. That is my summary. I'm available for any questions anyone might have.
there any questions for Hope? Hope, I think we have no questions, so thank you for your time. And sorry for the difficulties this morning.
You are welcome. Thank you very much for having us. We appreciate it.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's the external audit is a significant undertaking by both Hope's team and also Marion's team, who spends many hours supporting Hope, actually putting the stuff together that is reviewed. So congratulations to Marion and his team too for another successful audit. The next report is from internal audit. Todd Loretta will go through the status of previously issued recommendations.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So we'll be using this presentation right here, guys. Right here. So what I'd like to do is take a few minutes to go over the status of previously issued recommendations. If we can move to slide 2, I'd like to start by going over the basics of the overall internal audit cycle. You can see that slide. You have the audit plan here in the middle. You can see around the outside. We perform engagements throughout the year. It's a continuous process. We are never not auditing, so to speak. Like right now, we currently have 4 audits going on right now in various stages. You'll be seeing those over the next few months as we get them completed. If you look in the top left-hand corner, you see we usually perform an annual risk assessment in the April-May timeframe. We use that to prepare an annual audit plan. We present that to management and you guys here at our committee meetings, usually in the June-July timeframe. And then we come back around in September, October. We go back to the process owners and contact them and communicate with them regarding any open recommendations to check the status of those open recommendations, make sure they're following through with the action plan, so to speak. And then we come to you guys in October, November, and report on those. That's what I'm doing today. So we can try to keep this the same schedule every year so everybody knows what to expect and everybody's on the same page. We've been doing that for probably the past 8 or 9 years. So moving on to slide 3. So since 2011, we have issued 252 recommendations. Of those, 236 haven't been implemented at this point, so it's about 94%. We've been at about a 90% rate since about 2015. It kind of goes up and down from year to year, but the process owners have been really good about following through. Right now, we have 16 open items as of today. At the start of the period, back last November, we had 20 open items. During the year, we added 14 more, which brought the total up to 34. And then during the year, the process owners implemented 18 additional items, which brought it down to a number of 16, which we have open right now. If we move on to slide 4, this just shows the items by process owner area. I wouldn't read too much into this. A lot of it is in effect a result of which audits we've done recently. Executive management has a few more than we would normally have. I think some of the COVID activities have slowed some of those down. Any questions there? So let's move on to page 5, and I'd kind of go over the 16 that we have open. So executive management has 5 open items that are divided between three engagements. The first engagement is the fraud risk assessment that we issued in March 2019. We originally had 6 items as part of that, so they're down to implement 5, so we only have 1 left. They're in the process of developing a formal fraud awareness prevention program, which will have a formal policy, and then some actual training will be provided, and that's what we're looking for. That training will probably be online through the Learning District platform, which is being used for a lot of our training these days, especially with the COVID environment. So we expect to have that. We expect to have that completed next calendar year. The second audit that has some open items is the miscellaneous business expenses. We issued that audit in November of 19. Now that audit was about, we looked at credit cards, we looked at petty cash, we looked at travel expenses, business reimbursements, those kinds of things. One of the items we came up with around the credit cards, we thought the controls around the credit cards were not adequate at the time. So they have made a lot of improvements in this area. They got rid of some of the credit cards, they've increased the controls, they've moved a lot of the expenses over to a centralized Amazon business account, which has more centralized review and oversight. But the bottom line, the end game here is going to be a purchase card program they're going to implement in the next year or so. So until we get to that rolling, we're going to have to deal with the way they're doing it right now, but it has improved. And the reason we're waiting for the P card is because that's going to be controlled by the new Oracle. There's an upgrade to Oracle. They're upgrading Oracle to the cloud version of it right now, and there's a procurement module in that new Oracle system, and that will manage and administer that new program. So that will be done in probably next year or so. Any questions on that?
What percentage of expenses are handled?
Oh,
Not many.
It has to be less than 5%.
I would say 5 or 10%. Yeah, it's gone down as years are going on. So let's put it that way. And they had more credit cards. There was just a lot of credit cards at the sites, and they've reeled those in. They've got rid of a lot of them. They've centralized it, so it's much more improved. But
Can you come do that at my house?
I'm sorry.
We have a few travel cards out there that we haven't been traveling, but there's a few cards out there for.
I'm imagining it's only like half.
It's mostly the executive staff. There are some cards for local hardware stores and a local credit card when somebody at a facility needs to run out and get something, usually small.
Those are the ones we're concerned about. It wasn't the ones that were assigned to a specific person. Those are controlled well. It's the ones that were being used by multiple personnel that we wanted more control around. So we have improved that. So. Okay, so that kind of leads into my next item there. The next two items have to do with travel, which has been on hold. And they had to do with hotel rate justifications and some business expense reimbursements. As I said, our recommendation, the travel was put on hold for the last, I guess, year and a half. I guess it has been reinstated about a month or two ago for vaccinated personnel. So now at this point, management is going to revisit our recommendations, implement those, and put some new policies out. And they'll take care of that in next year. So any questions on that? Third item is public affairs. Our recommendation there was development and publishing of a formal communication plan around crisis events. It's a really best practice to have something formally in place. They do have a large draft in process right now. That's been getting delayed. They've been busy with all the COVID things going on right now, and they have been working on it. I have seen a draft of the policy. It's a very long policy, just so you guys know. It's about 30, 40-page document, so it's not a 2-page thing. So they're along the way with it. They should have it done by April. So, any questions there? Let's move on to slide. I'm sorry, I went past where I wanted to go. Slide 6 to finance. They have 3 open items from 2 different engagements. First engagement is purchase to pay. That was this issue originally in March 2021. So the first item has to do with invoices dated prior to PO. Basically, so what's happening here, we're making some purchases before we issue a PO. So we're going to limit those transactions as much as possible for several reasons. So finance has taken several steps to really curtail this, so to speak. They've met with management of different departments. They met with the processors. That's the person that's committing these violations of our policy, so to speak. And they've also contacted the vendors, which I think is a really good idea because the vendors need to really help us on this. They need to require a PO before they're taking an order or issuing an invoice. So I think that's really going to be helpful. So there's still more work to be done here. We will continue to work with Mary and his group on this. We'll monitor and follow up with them. We do monitor monthly along with AP. So the next item is system separation of duties. What we would like to see there is the separation of the purchase duty versus the receipt duty within the system. And again, this will be addressed through the upgrade to the cloud-based version of Oracle. They're kind of redesigning everything in Oracle, so that hopefully we'll be able to address it through that. And that Oracle implementation starts next spring, early next 2022. And the next item is the revenue audit, which we just issued last month. So there was one minor item there regarding special discharge billings. And that's not too complicated of an item. I expect that will be completed by the end of this calendar year. So any questions there? All right, let's move on to slide 7. IT. IT has 5 open items from 3 different engagements. I think they've done a really good job here. We've been hitting them pretty hard the last couple of years with all this cybersecurity stuff. So they've really done a good job of really making some headway in this stuff. So they started the period with 9 open items. We added 8 additional items during the year. And so they implemented 12 during the year, which leads to 5 open items. First audit is application database account management. That was issued in August 2020. Originally had 4 items issued. Now we're down to the last one, which they've done some good work here. And that has to do with establishing what they call logging procedures for Oracle and Maximo. The Oracle is completed. Maximo is in the test environment right now, and that should be finished by the end of the calendar year. Just to give you a little bit about logging. It's a mechanism to kind of track and record activities in those applications. And you can prevent suspicious activity or detect it. That's kind of what it's for. But the issue there, if you don't do it correctly, it can really slow down the system. So that's why it takes a little more time to do it correctly. So we expect it to take a little time. Next area is service desk. We issued that about 6 months ago. There were 4 items issued. 3 items are still open. Now, the first 2 items have to do with open tickets, and the process owners are in the process of implementing and developing reports and new processes to handle this, to monitor those tickets more closely, and to making sure they're hitting the target dates that are established in the system. So we expect that to be completed by the end of this calendar year. The last item for service desk was the credentials for elevated access. Now, the service desk personnel, a lot of times when they got to fix something, they have to get elevated access to do certain things in the system. So we want to see those privileges separated through a separate set of credentials to keep that access secure. That should be done by the end of the calendar year. The third item is network vulnerability, attack and penetration. That was the audit we did just recently in August 2021. We had 4 items issued, only 1 remains open, so they've done a really good job on this as well. That last item is segmentation. Again, like the logging, this is an item that takes a lot of time. If you don't do it correctly, it can really slow down the system. So that's why we're expecting to take a little more time with it. They're almost there, I think. So expect to have that completed by the end of the fiscal year. So any questions there? All right. Last page is slide 8. Legal. We did a review of the legal department back in July 2019. And the one item that remains open is we had a recommendation around the storage of open matter files and historical documents. Recommendations were really a lot around protecting them and making sure they were safe. They were kind of just sitting in the file room. And this kind of goes along with our overall information governance program right now. All of our departments are going to this more digital, and we're trying to get rid of trash and protect our documents and get them, into a digital system. So they have taken some very good steps. They've digitized a lot of the documents. They've moved some of the other documents in protective containers. They're using more off-site storage. What remains is digitizing a large portion. There's about 50% that needs to be digitized. There's a lot of scanning involved. So that should be finished by the end of this calendar year of 2022. Any questions there? Now, the last area is operations. There's 2 items that belong to the review of the plant pump station system cybersecurity audit. That audit is where we looked at the systems, computer systems for our operations systems, basically the systems that control our plant, control our pump stations. That network is separate from our business network. It's a fully separate network. but that does talk to the business network. And what we recommended in our audit was, despite the fact they're separate, we want to make sure that, because the business network faces the internet, and the fact that they talk to each other, we want to make sure that the protection between the two was adequate. So we recommend some improved protection between those two networks, and that's what they're working on. They've made a lot of progress, but there's still more work to do, and we'll continue to follow up on that. I guess one thing I should mention, when we do our attack and penetration audits, we always try to move from the business network into that operations network and try to attack it. We have not been successful, so that's good news. And the last item is disaster recovery business continuity. That pertains specifically to this operations systems. Now, IT has finalized a business continuity disaster recovery program, or I guess program's by this way, for the overall business network, and we're going to test that in January. They did some testing already, they ran through it, and when we do that, we'll also touch on this program for the operations program as well and see where they're at. So they've done some work, but there's still more to come, I guess I should say. So we'll look at it in January. So any questions? So I guess the bottom line, I think they've done a really good job of following through on our recommendations. So.
All right, thank you, Todd. And this is something that Todd does annually, just gives you an update on where we are on each of the outstanding recommendations. That is all the business we had for this meeting, Trustee Watson.
Okay, thank you. Next meeting tentatively Tuesday, November 30th, 2021. A meeting adjourned. A motion?
So move. Second.
All right, that's good.
Move up the stuff you don't want. We'll get set up as quickly as we can for the Finance Committee.
Finance Committee, roll call, I assume, will reflect those present.
That's correct.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from October 5th, please?
So move.
Second.
Okay, minutes are approved. Tim, can we have our portfolio update, please?
Yes, so monthly portfolio update. And the biggest change here is really just in the portfolio amount. It's down about 20 million from last month. Some of that is timing of an investment at the end of the month. That's about half of it. Another and half of the remaining is just spending more than we brought in. And then we also did our semi-annual pension contribution. We made about a $6 million pension contribution in the past month as well. So portfolio is down about 21 million. As far as the characteristics of the portfolio, and I'm in the upper left-hand box, the yield to maturity on our portfolio is up just a few basis points because short-term rates have been rising and a portion of our portfolio turned over. As we talk about every month, the benchmark, since the entire portfolio turns over every month and rates are going up, that portfolio, or the benchmark portfolio, actually went up 16 basis points. So as rates come down, benchmark goes down faster than we do. As it goes up faster than we do. Weighted average maturities are roughly the same in the portfolio. Sector allocations in the upper right. No significant changes there. We're within our policy limits, so we are in compliance with the policy. And there's no real big changes in the maturity distribution. Again, this is just so you can see the comparison of our portfolio versus the benchmark. We're the blue bars. We have keep more of our portfolio short because we use it to pay for projects and operations and that sort of thing. So that's why you see some differences between our portfolio and the benchmark also. Any questions about the operating portfolio? All right. I'm just going to continue then. Next, I want to give you an update on municipal advisor RFP and recommendations. So we use a municipal advisor to help us with long-term financial projections and mainly with bond issuances. So they help us negotiate with the investment banks and help us plan out what kind of debt makes the most sense, where rates should be, that sort of thing. So we did an RFP recently. We got 4 qualified responses. One was from PFM, who's been our longtime municipal advisor, another from IPA, who has been a co-advisor with PFM. So the relationship has been 75% PFM, 25% IPA, who is a women and minority-owned firm. So that's how we have historically split that up. We got 2 other responses, one from a firm out of Indianapolis called Sycamore Advisor. It's a women-owned firm. They're relatively small, but I've seen them on some big bond issuances, mainly for Chicago, I think is where they do a lot of work, but I've seen them in other places too. And then also Baker Tilly, who is mainly known as an accounting firm. I did not know they did municipal advisory service, actually. Our recommendation is to continue our relationship with PFM and IPA. PFM is the largest municipal advisory firm in the nation. They are, on average, pricing about 4 deals a day, every day, municipal deals. So that is very big. Baker Tilly is probably a little bit less than half that, and Sycamore wasn't on the table. But like I said, I've seen them on some big deals before. So these are all capable firms. The way we scored the RFP, and the group was Marion, myself, and the Assistant Secretary Treasurer, John Stroman. We looked at the quality of the firm, their reputation, their experience in the industry. PFM came out ahead on that. We looked at their proposal responses to our questions, what we asked them to do. PFM rated the highest on that. And then also just understanding of the district, our financial situation. And then PFM also scored highest on that, which is not surprising because they've been with us for about 20 years. Pricing was also a component of this. Baker Tilly was actually the cheapest. PFM, IPA, and Sycamore were all roughly the same. Using the assumptions that we made, Baker Tilly was roughly $25,000 less a year. But I do want to point out that most of these costs are baked into the financing, and so they're spread out. So the annual cost would be, maybe $1,000 a year. And that also assumes that we don't have any special projects. Baker Tilly and Sycamore had some hourly rates for some special projects. PFM has a retainer built into theirs that there wouldn't be additional costs. And I don't expect special projects every year, but overall, I think, given the amount that we're talking about, which is probably a couple $100,000 a year total, roughly, the pricing did not factor into the recommendation. So the recommendation is going to be a new contract with PFM and IPA. Any questions about that?
When you hire the financial advisor, you said they're not compensated from the deal.
They are compensated from the deals. That's the bulk of their.
There's no incentive for them to advise to close a deal.
The way the pricing works, there's, for example, with PFM, there's separate pricing for a senior deal, which it would be that when we go to the market, for example, it's a little bit more expensive than when we go to the state and get SRF funding, because most of that work's already done. I mean, the contract, there's not a lot for them to review. So PFM actually has the cheapest price for the subordinated debt, which is the SRF loans, which we've been doing more of lately. So the other thing that could lower PFM's costs if we continue to do more SRF than what we've budgeted, which I actually expect will probably happen. But they do, there is a per bond deal, and let's say, a bond is set on a size limit. So the bigger the bond deal, the more the municipal advisor gets compensated. Was that your question?
Yeah, but But you also referred to a retainer.
So PFM had pitched this last time where they had a higher per bond cost with no retainer, or a retainer with a lower per bond cost. And we chose the higher per bond cost because we didn't think that we were going to issue as many bonds as what we had forecast, and it would work out a little bit better. This time they didn't offer us that option. It actually would have been slightly cheaper to go with the retainer route because we do have them do regular kind of reviews. I think, for example, we just did the forward delivery bonds. We're going to the rating agencies now after the fact, which is a little bit different. Usually we do that before we sign agreements. And so they're helping us put together the rating agency presentation, for example, which is something that's normal, but it covers all the other things that they do. There's a separate cost for the rate commission process, which is, happens once every 4 years. But outside of that, we do a lot of long-term planning. They help us, review some of these new laws. I mean, right now there's some potential tax law changes. Looks like we're not going to get what we want probably out of them. But there are some outside projects. That's what the retainer is supposed to cover. Since we issued less bonds than they expected, I think they didn't get the income that they expected, and so they had to retain.
They're going to give the district advice to proceed with the closing or.
Yeah, they're giving us advice on that. They are helping us negotiate pricing. So PFM has their own pricing group too. When they're in the market that many times a day, they have their own pricing group. So they can actually sit across the table from the bank's pricing group, and we push back on things. So that's the other point I actually wanted to make, is well, I can't quantify it because I don't know with a different advisor exactly how those kind of services might be different. But 1 basis point on one of our bond deals more than makes up for any price difference that we were talking about. It was that close.
Okay.
Any other questions about that RFP? Okay, so recommendations will be on at the board meeting next week, sorry. The next item is debt policy update. So I have a copy of the debt policy if you want a reference. I did send it out last week. The debt policy was first written in 2004, and we do review it regularly, but it doesn't, I don't think that it's ever been brought to the board for actual changes. It's worked fine, although as there have been slight law changes while the policy has worked, I think there's a few things that started to build up that we wanted to adjust or bring to your attention. And so what we want to do is probably start, while we do review this regularly, set a process of reviewing it annually and bringing it to you annually with updates. So I have a handful of changes I just want to walk you through. This will be a resolution at the board meeting next week asking for you to approve these changes to the debt policy. So I'm just going to go through the changes instead of a page by page of the debt policy. So in the policy statement on page 3, we added a sentence. The debt policy already allowed trustees to approve a debt deal that went outside of the debt policy a little bit if it was appropriate. That kind of language is in there because laws change, markets change, that sort of thing. We just added a sentence to clarify that would be done through the approvals of a bond issuance ordinance. So it'd be done by ordinance. That makes it a little bit more formal and in writing. On page 6 of the policy in a section called types of debt, this isn't actually something that we have done yet and don't have any plans to do right now, but right now the language says that we'll use a financial advisor for analysis and support of a swap deal, which would mean you would issue variable rate debt maybe and then synthetically turn it to fixed or vice versa. Again, we haven't done that, don't have any plans to do that, but based on comments from our financial advisor, the swap rules are a little bit different than the regulations they follow as a financial advisor. So they said they can't actually opine on some of the things that we would want. So they recommend that we get a swap advisor for technical analysis if we were to do a swap. So we just made that change to the debt policy. Again, we have no plans right now to do a swap, debt policy allows it. But we just wanted to make that change now. Also on page 6, in a section called Purpose of Debt, it talks about refunding bonds. Typically, we've done advance refunding bonds, and we set kind of a minimum saving threshold. We haven't changed that. The policy actually stated that in a current refunding, meaning that when the bonds are callable, and so far we haven't gotten to bonds that have gotten to their call date without being refunded, although we do have some small amounts coming due next year. In the policy, it said that there'd have to be a minimum 3% savings in order to do a refunding or refinancing of a current. We wanted to change that just to say any savings. I mean, if we can get a 2% savings, why wouldn't we do that if it was available? And that, again, be a current refunding. So it wouldn't be, we have a higher bar when we do an advance refunding, because there you're saying, okay, I'm refunding bonds today that aren't actually callable for a few years. But if the bonds are able to be refinanced right now today, then we should be willing to take any savings. And that's offset by cost, that sort of thing. So that's the ask there. Any questions about that one? Page 7, in, again, purpose of debt section, there's an escrow structuring. So one thing when we do advance refundings, we have to set aside money that pays off the bonds until they get to the call date, then pays off all the remaining bonds. The debt policy said that required us to use the least costly securities available to structure refunding escrows. However, there are different security options available, and sometimes you might have a very, very minimal cost, but the lower cost option might have a higher risk of default or not being available when you need them. And so we changed this to remove the least costly word and just say that we'll use the financial advisors to assist us in choosing the right security. So if it's a few $100 difference in the types of securities being used, but one is a government protected safe security, we could put that, and one would be open market securities that might have some risk of default. We would rather pay a couple $100 extra and get the safer security. So that's the reason for that recommendation. Page 9, types of product. Again, this is not something that we've done. The debt policy does allow for some interest rate swaps. And so we're replacing the term LIBOR. LIBOR is London Interbank Offer Rate. It is the basis for most, has been the basis historically for most variable rate debt. However, it is being phased out and done away with. And it's not entirely sure what might be the long-term replacement for it, so we just added some language. Instead of LIBOR, it's market accepted interest rate average, similar to LIBOR. Page 12, structural features, credit enhancement. It used to be standard that we would buy something like a bond insurance when we issued bonds. That was for protection of the buyers of our bonds. For highly rated issuers like us, that hasn't been marketed since 2013. We haven't had to buy that. So we wanted to strike this language. The fact is that our ordinances already, the trustees already, once they approve the deal, allow us to enter into any agreement that effectuates the transaction. And sometimes that might be something that, might be when you're sitting at the table at the end of the day, talking to the bank, and they're talking to investors, and investors say, look, I'm just not interested in doing this unless you add some kind of credit insurance. I don't expect that's going to happen or come back quickly for issuers like us that are highly rated, but it could be a last minute thing. And so having to go back to the board for a separate okay on just that specific thing might upset the timing of the bonds. So since the ordinance already say that the board authorizes the staff, once you approve the bond deal, to enter in any transaction that'll effectuate the transaction, we just thought that this was something that could be cleaned up. Any concerns on these, let me know. Page 13, liquidity facility. The policy as it stands, and we don't have any liquidity facility, but if we were to do short-term borrowing, for example, issue commercial paper, which again, we have not done, don't have any immediate plans to do. Right now it says that we would have to use a bank that has long-term ratings equal to or better than MSDs. There are no banks that have long-term ratings equal to or better than MSDs. So we removed that language. We maintained language that said they had to be of the highest short-term ratings, but just added language that we will use the financial advisor for a recommendation from a bank if we did something like this. But as it stands now, the language would prevent us from even having a commercial paper program because we couldn't pick a bank that has better ratings than us because there are none. Almost done. Page 13 on the tax status. This was not something that we thought about years ago. Then in 2017, the tax law changed to not allow tax-exempt advancer funding, but you can do taxable. So we've actually done a taxable advancer funding before. And we were hoping that tax-exempt advancer funding would come back, but it was actually just taken out of some of the bills that are going through Congress right now. So I know there's some push to try to get that language back, but I think it's getting pretty late. But anyway, due to the changes, we just added a clarification that new money issues should be tax exempt. And refunding should be issued in a manner that achieves the most projected saving, whether it's taxable or tax exempt. Tax exempt could only be used in a current refunding or in a forward delivery, which is just contracting early for a future current refunding. And then last one, method of bond issuances. It was never disallowed by the policy, but we just added a sentence that says the trustees may approve parameters or ordinances. That's the way we brought ordinances to you and the board immediately prior to this board. It used to be that we would set kind of a draft ordinance that would be approved, and then on the night that we priced the bonds, we'd have an emergency board meeting where we have to get everybody on the phone and get final approval of, the final terms. By setting the parameters, we can take care of everything beforehand. We don't have any hiccups at the end trying to get people together, and that way you can agree in advance that as long as the bonds fit within these parameters of savings and dollar amount and interest rate, that sort of thing, that we can move forward with the issuance. And our municipal advisor helps us with that. So those are the changes that we're recommending to the debt policy. Any questions or concerns, please let me know. Okay. All right, so that'll be a resolution. We have one more. I have one more resolution before I turn over to Marion. It is time for renewal of an option year, actually in the contract of our actuarial consultant. We use Milliman to advise on the pension plan. They've done a good job. They're a large firm. I think I've got them working on some analysis that I hope to bring to you at the next meeting next month. They've done a good job for us. This resolution will be to approve the third of 4 potential one-year contract extensions, and then we'll do another RFP. If it weren't for COVID, you probably would have seen them in here a couple of times already. We like to bring them in a couple of times a year to discuss things, but if we may need him on the phone next month. But he's working on analysis. Like I said, we're going to talk about potentially changing the the return rate assumption on the pension again. But they've done a great job, and so we'd like to continue using them. They also are helping HR now with, we used to use some software to project pension payments to retirees, and now Milliman is doing this work for us as well. If there are no questions on that, I'm going to turn it over to Marion for the last item.
Thank you, Tim. This next item has to do with our external audit contract. Just want to take a moment to talk about a change to our charter that impacted the selection. Prior to April of this year, our charter required that we change auditors every 5 years. Staff recommended to the Charter Change Commission, and the voters approved language which basically would allow us to maintain an existing audit firm. However, the partner in charge of that audit had to be removed for that 5-year period if he or she worked on the prior audit. So we issued an RFP a few months ago that contained that revised language. The reason that we recommended that change is that we were seeing very few responses to our audit RFPs. Typically, we would get 3 or 4 responses, and in some cases, some of the firms that responded really weren't qualified to do the work. This time we issued an RFP, we still got 3 responses, so we were very fortunate that charter change was approved. We looked at the qualifications of the firms, of course, that were submitting, their experience with conducting governmental audits, utility audits, especially the engagement team that they're proposing to work on the audit, their qualifications, and their approach to conducting the audit. The team that reviewed the audit consisted of Tim, our internal auditor, Todd Loretta, and myself. And what we're recommending is that we maintain our existing auditor, Clifton Larson Allen. They were the highest rated, of course, from the evaluation, but they also submitted the lowest price. The difference between their price and the highest price that was submitted was $187,000. So without that charter change amendment, the district could have potentially be paying an additional $100,000 and almost $90,000 for our audits over that 5-year time period. They will, of course, comply with the charter change amendment, and so as a result of this recommendation, the audit manager, Hope Willard, that spoke to you today, will not participate on the audit going forward, nor will the auditor in charge, their partner that reviews our audits. So they'll rotate out those particular positions. So there will be an ordinance if you approve that will appear on next week's board agenda with the recommendation for a 1-year contract with 4 option years. So if there are any questions that I can answer. Okay. That's all that I have, and I think that concludes the items on the agenda.
All right, thank you, Marion. Thank you, Tim. The next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, November 30th. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Switching up a little bit, we're going to go to the stakeholders committee. If you move your stuff forward, we'll get prepped and ready to go.
To the November Stakeholder Relations Committee meeting, I will ask that the recorder indicate all trustees are present, except
Nickerson, correct.
Nickerson,
Nickerson.
yeah.
There are no comments by the chair. Can I get a motion to approve the committee meeting minutes of October the 5th?
So moved.
Second. With no objection, the minutes are approved. Ms. Meyer, you have the next 2 items.
I have the whole agenda, I think, so. The first item is a proposed resolution that will be on the board agenda next Thursday night. It is for to authorize the district to exercise the first option year and enter into a 1-year renewal contract with Beck, Dickhouse and Associates. They collect on excess proceeds that are available when properties are sold at tax sales in both St. Louis City and St. Louis County. The last year, we entered into a new contract with them. They'd been with us prior to that. but this contract that we entered into last year provided for a one-year contract with 4 additional one-year renewal terms. This is the first renewal term of those 4. And so I would ask that this be on the agenda for next Thursday. Just for your information, since 2015, we have recovered over $1 million of excess taxes that are available. So what that process is when a property gets sold at a tax sale, if there is an overdue sewer bill on that property, and then if there is excess funds available once the other taxes and that are paid, then we get to recoup that money that's due to us. So we used to do that in-house a long time ago. We found that Beck can do it much more aggressively than we could and catch things ahead of time. And so it's been a really good contract with them. So, any questions on that? Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the state and federal legislative priorities. Just for your all's information, I bring these to the board every year. There's no action needed on your part. It's just so you guys can see what legislative priorities we have out there. I typically bring these before the legislative session starts. These legislative priorities meet Strategy 1, Objective 2 of the district's strategic business operating plan. We developed them in consultation with our federal lobbyist, Brent Franzel, and our state lobbyist, Kina Iman. We discuss with them what the district's needs are, and then we get input from them as to what they see maybe coming up throughout the year. Both of these documents are dynamic. They're not really set in stone. So, I mean, if something comes up throughout the year that you all see or that we see, we would have another discussion and we can update these documents. I'm going to go through and review each one of them briefly. They don't change a whole lot during from one year to the next, but I will touch on the changes. So the first one is the state legislative priorities document. As you can see, it's kind of organized into general priorities, financial priorities, and then regulatory priorities. There are no real significant changes this year. The one item that did change under financial, the 4th bullet item, we specifically called out ARPA funds as grant funds that we will be trying to secure from the state of Missouri. We wanted to pull those out and specifically refer to them. Other than that, there were no real significant changes here. Does anybody have any questions or want me to discuss any of the priorities in more detail? Okay, hearing none, I will move on to the federal priorities. So you should have another sheet, looks a whole lot like the state legislative priorities. They are also organized by general priorities, financial priorities, and regulatory priorities. Again, we didn't have a lot of changes here. We did, under financial, we removed one of the priorities from last year because we actually obtained it, and so it didn't need to be on here anymore. What that priority was, we had, our federal lobbyist was working with our congressional delegates to get the appropriation in the WARDA bill, which is Water Resource Development Act bill, to get the appropriation increase from 35 million to 70 million. That got accomplished last year. The WARDA bill was signed into law in 2020, and what that did was it increased the funding that goes to the Corps of Engineers that we work side by side with to address some of the CSO and drainage problems in our combined sewer system. Any more information on that, I can ask Rich to chime in. So, okay, so we removed that priority, and then the only other change was under regulatory. The third bullet item under regulatory is a new item. What we did was we pulled out emerging contaminants from the second bullet, so we made a specific bullet item to indicate that we would monitor the legislation on emerging contaminants. PFAS, I don't know if anybody has heard of that. That's a big issue in the environmental world, so we wanted to point it out in our priorities. Also, we will be monitoring the permitting requirements, providing greater consideration for environmental justice, and on permitting requirements to address climate change. So we felt those three items needed to have a priority of their own, so we can make sure that we monitor that type of legislation. Any questions at all on either the state or the federal priorities? And like I said, if anybody has any questions or comments or why we're doing, certain priorities or following certain priorities, just let me know and we can have another discussion about them. But there's no action. This was just for your information. So I think that covers the agenda, all the items on the agenda.
No questions? Any other business? Then our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for November the 30th. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Pleasure of my life.
Thank you.
Almost back on schedule.
Financial Committee. Get a roll call, please.
We'll note that all trustees except trustee Nicholas are present.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
All right, Engineering Department agenda items.
Good morning, trustees. We're going to review the packet of agenda items for next Thursday's meeting. That's quite lengthy, but I think we'll be able to consolidate some of the items to keep us moving along. The first 4 items are construction projects that were bid over the past month. First item, Clayton Road sanitary sewer replacement. This action will appropriate funds and authorize staff to enter a construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction of approximately 392 feet sanitary sewers at 12 inches in diameter. The purpose of this project is to remove and replace a failing sanitary sewer. The district received 4 bids on this project. The low bid was from Gershenson Construction. The bid was slightly over our engineer's estimate, and our appropriation of $330,000 is above our budget. It includes $30,000 for utility relocation on the project. Gershenson is committed to just over 17% MBE participation in the project, which meets our goal for the project. All right, the next item is the Dolan Place and Grandview Place Combined Sewer Relief Project. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter a construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction of approximately 650 linear feet of 12 to 36 inch diameter combined sewers and approximately 635 feet of 9 feet by 6 foot wide storage pipe and 400 linear feet of concrete retaining wall and appurtenances. This purpose, this project is to reduce basement backups and alleviate wet weather surcharging of our combined sewer system. The district received 3 bids on this project. The low bid was from Gershenson Construction Company. The bid was below our design estimate, and our appropriation of $2.8 million is below our budget for the project. That budget includes $200,000 for utility relocation. Gershenson is committed to 17.15% MBE African American participation, which meets the 17% goal for the project. The next item is the Missouri River Wastewater Treatment Facility digester gas storage cover replacement. Appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction and removal and replacement of the existing dual membrane covers, flexible piping, and associated instrumentation on digesters number 3 and 4. The purpose of this project is to replace the digester storage covers that have reached their useful life. The district received 2 bids on this particular project. The low bid was from Evoqua Water Technologies. The bid was below our design estimate, and our appropriation of $1,280,000 is just below our budget. This is Evoqua Water Technology is a manufacturer installer. Before we proceeded to bid with this project, typically for this type of project, the manufacturer does the installation, and there's really no opportunity for subcontracting. In other words, it's all self-performed. So in this particular case, we waived the MWBE requirement on the project. So, and they are not a minority or woman-owned firm. So rather than them to have to just make up work for some minority to do, we just waived it for the project in this particular one. Not very often, maybe just a couple projects a year that we do that. All right, the next item is Broadhead Storm Sewer. The purpose of this action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter a construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction of approximately 178 feet of 30-inch diameter storm sewers. The purpose of the project is to alleviate channel erosion near the downstream end of the current storm system located on Broadhead Avenue in Del Rio Court in unincorporated St. Louis County. The district received 3 bids for this project. The low bid was from Waymar Farms Incorporated. The bid was below our designer's estimate, and our appropriation of $250,000 is just below the budget for the project. Waymar Farms is committed to 17.81% MBE participation, which meets our 17% goal on this sewer project. Okay, changing a little bit. The next two items are both CSO Vine Green Infrastructure grant projects. The first one is for Doorways 2.0 admin and retail space. This ordinance authorizes the district to enter into agreement with Interfaith Residents doing business as Doorways to provide financial assistance through a green infrastructure grant program. The purpose of this project is to reduce combined sewer overflows to the Mississippi River for the long-term control plan. This project will reduce runoff with the installation of 2 bioretention basins and a green roof and amended soils. The total project cost is $220,616, and Interfaith Residents is requesting approximately $129,600 reimbursement for the cost of the green infrastructure. In your packet, you'll see the location of this project is in the North City area, and they're actually North Jefferson, just north of the district here. And you'll see the dark green shows where the green roof is and the additional bioretention and amended soils. Next item, again, is a CSO Green Infrastructure Grant for Doorways. It's for their MHDC housing facility. Again, the ordinance authorizes the district to enter agreement with Interfaith Residents for Green Infrastructure Grant. Again, the purpose is to reduce combined sewer overflows to the Mississippi River. This project will reduce volume with the installation of 3 bioretention basins at the facility. The total cost of this project is estimated at $244,188, and Interfaith is requesting $239,400 reimbursement for the green infrastructure. Again, this project's in the same general vicinity, just a little bit to the south of the previous project. And again, these are both located in our Bissell watershed or combined sewer overflow, reduce water to the overflow to the Mississippi River. The next few items are annual appropriations for easement acquisition funds. These funds help provide funds to my staff that acquire easements to reimburse property owners for the cost of those easements. The first one is for the easement acquisition for our wastewater projects. This is generally our largest, where we acquire a number of easements for all of our wastewater projects that we do throughout the year, and I'll give you some statistics here in a minute. The ordinance appropriates $3.5 million of funds for staff to take further efforts to acquire necessary property rights by the means of donation, purchase, contract lease, or exercise the power of eminent domain in order to construct our sanitary and combined sewer projects. Just a kind of some statistics. With that $3.5 million, we anticipate acquiring 352 easements over the course of the year. Kind of give you some perspective that we're probably at the peak of our sanitary program. In other words, we have more sanitary relief projects that I bring to you every month, where we're going through a lot of people's properties, putting in our sewer systems. This is the most this upcoming year will be the most easements we've acquired for some time. Going back to fiscal year 19, we acquired 134, in fiscal year 20, 223, and then fiscal year 21, 199. So our program, we had some larger tunnels that we were doing earlier in the program, doing a lot of I&I work, private property removal and rehabilitation. We're probably at the peak over the next 3 years of doing sanitary relief projects to increase the capacity of our system. So that's why the number of easements and the dollars required for that. Are there any questions? Okay. The next couple items are very similar, but we're actually taking the dollars not from the sanitary fund, but from the individual OMCI stormwater taxing districts, and those will fund our easement acquisitions for the stormwater projects that we're doing in those areas. To recall, After we were unsuccessful with the district-wide rate, we turned the OMCI taxes back on and started doing projects in those areas that were funding. And then, obviously, to do those projects, we require easements to do the work. And so we appropriate separate dollars for that. The first one is the easement acquisition for the Deer Creek OMCI. This ordinance appropriates funds to take further actions to acquire necessary property rights, again, by means of negotiation, condemnation, to construct the stormwater projects in the Deer Creek watershed. In the Deer Creek watershed, we've got a number of projects. We're anticipating acquiring about 45 easements for those projects, for the total of $350,000, I'm sorry. The next item, very similar, but it's in the Maline Creek watershed. Again, appropriates a total of $80,000 for stormwater projects in the Maline watershed, and that's to acquire a total of about 13 easements for those projects, for a total of $80,000. Here's, and then finally, easement acquisition for the University City OMCI stormwater projects. To acquire easements, we're appropriating $95,000, and we anticipating acquiring approximately 19 easements for those stormwater projects. Any question on the easement acquisition funding? Okay. Next item is actually an easement condemnation for Project Fenton Creek Pump Station improvements. This ordinance authorizes the staff to proceed with further condemnation efforts, including the filing of all necessary court pleadings and documents leading to the acquisition of one parcel of ground located in unincorporated St. Louis County. The easement, temporary construction easement, is needed to construct a project which consists of replacement of a pump station, the construction of 700 feet of 4-inch diameter force main, the construction of 840 feet of 8-inch diameter sanitary sewer. The purpose of this project is to eliminate building backups and overcharged sanitary sewers required by the consent decree. In your packet, you'll see the one parcel on the large sheet there, hatchered in yellow. It's parcel 1. It's actually in common ground of a subdivision there, located there on Birch Meadow. There were 4 easements that we needed for the project. We acquired 3 of them, leaving 1. We really do anticipate getting this easement. We have been back and forth, and communications when you're dealing with trustees isn't always the best, and they actually have a project manager. So we've been trading. Basically, it's discussing over the tree damage that's going to take place in the area and compensation for that damage and what's going to be replaced. But we anticipate getting it, but in order to keep the project moving and on schedule, we're requesting to send them the letter moving to condemnation. All right, the next item is the CCTV inspection, physical inspection of sewers. This appropriates additional funds and authorizes staff to amend a contract and exercise a second option year of this existing contract. The ordinance provides for amendment number 3 with ACE pipe cleaning. The purpose of this contract is to provide district staff with information regarding sewer condition by the use of CCTV or closed circuit television inspection, physical inspection, sonar inspection, and laser profiling. These inspections will determine our sewer conditions, will form the basis for our preventative maintenance programs and our inflow and infiltration programs, both with engineering and operation. And with this, there is sewer cleaning that is involved with this work. This contract is for $2.5 million on its annual, and again, it's the renewal of an ongoing contract with ACE pipe cleaning. It is considered a professional service, a vendor service, so there's no goal for MWBE, but because of some of the items that they do with the project, they are committing to 10%. Right now, they're running under that, Again, it all depends on the work that we schedule for them on an annual basis. And those firms that they have listed there could be for engineering, could be for cleaning services, things like that. And if they're able to deal without those services, we may not meet that 10% goal. All right, the next three items are the renewal of our construction management consulting contracts. These are the consultants that are additions to my staff. Internally, we do the construction inspection of all the, pretty much all the sewer work and small pump station work, but when you get to large facilities like tunnel facilities, large treatment plants and large pump stations that require full-time, more technical expertise in the area of electrical, mechanical, or things like that, we utilize outside consultants. These we refer to sometimes as watershed contracts. These are long-term contracts that we've entered into with the consent decree to provide those services over that period of time. Obviously, if they're not performing, we could move forward to find someone else to do that work. The firms have all been performing well for us. So this is the annual renewal of the dollars for those contracts. The first one is the CM services for the lower and middle river to pair tunnel facilities. This appropriates funds that authorize staff to amend the construction contract with Shannon and Wilson. The projects that they're managing, they provide services for the lower and middle river to pair CSO improvement projects, and I'll detail those projects here in a minute. They provide the preliminary construction estimate for the tunnel projects is $746 million overall for the projects that they're overseeing. The project consists of the biddability, constructability review during the design of the tunnel projects and the construction management services during construction. The estimated construction management ranges for the entire program of $70 to $80 million overall for this contract. This contract amendment is for $2.8 million, which brings the current contract value to $15,300,000. The appropriation for construction is about $100,000 below the proposed budget in the supplement. This is the, it's above $100,000 above what we had in the budget supplement. On this particular project, we're asking their expertise. We have a project, they're doing the inspection for the Jefferson Barracks Tunnel project, and you guys are familiar with that one. We have a project in the quarries that we're replacing a pump station and a force main through the quarry. In order to operate on the quarry, our inspectors are required to have mine safety training, and that's not something our internal staff has, but our consultant that's working on the JB, which is adjacent to it, does have that. So we're asking them that additional $100,000 is to perform those services on that particular project. It's a short-term project for about a year, so this will be the only year. That's why we have the additional $100,000 in there. With regard to MWBE, there was a commitment for this project of 30% MWBE participation for this consultant services. This amendment, the amount of work that they're planning to do this year, they anticipate about 33% of the work will go to minority and women subcontractors. Those are listed on the front. Right now, for the years that they've been working, right now they're running about 37% MWB participation. So they're running above their commitment by about 7%. Any questions on that one? All right, the next one is CM services for the Lower Merrimack and Deer Creek Tunnel project. Again, appropriates funds, additional funds that authorize staff to amend the existing contract with Black and Veatch for the projects associated with the Merrimack Tunnel Systems, the River to Pair CSO projects, which are future projects, and the Deer Creek and University City sewer projects. The preliminary construction estimate for these projects is $630 million. This project consists of the biddability, constructability review during the design of these projects and the construction management services during the construction. The total value of the entire construction management program is expected to be between 40 and 60 million. This contract amendment of $2 million brings the current contract value to $27,990,000. The appropriation for construction management is below what's proposed in the budget supplement. The projects that they're working on, and the reason it's actually significantly lower, we had about 4.8, so it's about 2 million lower than what we had planned. One of the major projects that they're managing for us is the Lower Merrimack Tunnel, and that project, there's a delay in getting that project started, getting the machine in the ground. They are working on the project, so we won't need as many services over the next fiscal year. So basically, that funding just gets pushed out a following year. With regard to MWBE, on this particular project, there was a 30% commitment on this particular project by the consultant, Black & Veatch. They anticipate using just slightly about 29.94% with the work they're planning this year, but overall they're running about 38% MWB participation on the project, which exceeds that original 30% commitment. And then finally, it's a CM services for the tanks, treatment plant, pump station facilities. These are ones I mentioned earlier. These are the ones that require the mechanical, electrical expertise that my staff can't provide. So we have those inspection services contracted out. We're going to appropriate additional funds and authorize staff to amend an existing contract with KAI 360 Construction Services. The work is for the tanks, treatment plants, and pump station facilities located within the district's CSO and SSO program. Preliminary construction estimate for all the facility work is approximately $500 million. The project consists again of the biddability, constructability during the design and construction management services during construction. The value of the management contract for the entire program is estimated between 40 and 60 million. The contract amendment of $7 million will bring the current, which is equal to what we had in the budget, will bring the current value to $34,650,000. Some of the projects that they'll be working on are the Kingsland Storage Facility, the Watkins Creek Pump Station, the Weeza and Arsenal Pump Stations, and the Vance Road Pump Station. Those are ones that they'll be providing construction management services. And again, they provide services during the design. So they're reviewing some of our projects, such as the L51 and L52 pump station odor control projects. So they assist in those, and then they'll inspect those. And the Cox Creek Pump Station A improvements and the Lemay Pump Station 3 force main project. Those are projects that they provide review of the contract plans and documents before they go out, and then they'll eventually inspect those. From an MWB perspective, the overall commitment to MWBE was 48%. KI 360 is a minority-owned firm. With this amendment, they anticipate 74% of the work being performed by minority and women firms. Right now, their overall participation is about 63%, which exceeds that 48% commitment. So we're getting a significant amount of minority and women participation on this particular project. And those are the three construction management projects. Is there any questions on those before I move on? Okay, thank you. The next item is a general service agreement for facility and sewer design, Contract A. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a design contract. This ordinance authorizes the district to enter a 1 year with one option year with Donahue and Associates for design of various projects in the CIRP and operations budget. The project consists of the design of small sanitary, combined storm sewer, and treatment plant projects as needed throughout the district to support our ongoing internal design effort. This contract is for a total maximum of $475,000. The project will be issued by letter agreement per individual scope of work. This is very similar. This is an extension of my internal staff. We do a lot of the small projects. We do the design for storm projects and sewer projects. But on this particular case, Donahue provides us where there's infrastructure projects, say at a pump station or treatment plant. We don't have those internal mechanical, electrical expertise that Donahue can provide. So we utilize them on multiple projects. It may be anything from planning effort to actual design. We went out for RFP. There were 4 other proposers considered for the project, and Donahue was selected based on quality-based selection. On professional services contracts, there are no MWBE goals for the project, but we do have a commitment from Donahue for 25% participation from 3 minority and women-owned subcontractors. All right. All right, the next 2 packages I'm kind of going to group together. They're general services agreement. These are annual contracts we do to support my internal engineering staff in the area of geotechnical and survey services. So the first one is general service agreement for geotechnical services. There are 3 contracts, contracts A, B, C, and the ordinance authorizes us to enter a 1-year contract with 1 option years with rights and gens for contract A, for Geotechnology Incorporated for contract B, and Geosyntec Consultant Incorporated for contract C. The services provided include rock and soil analysis, testing, recommendation and evaluation of foundation, slopes, and bedding for projects to be completed by in-house design or design consultants. Projects will be issued by letter agreement per individual scope of services. The contract is a total amount of $85,000 for each one of these 3 contracts for 1 year, and of course they're renewable for 1 more. We did go out for RFP on this particular services. We received 4 total proposals, and these 3 firms were the 3 selected for the project. All 3, there are no goals for MWBE, but all 3 firms have provided a commitment. Rights and Gens committed to 20% minority and women subcontracting, Geotechnology 25%, and Geosyntec's 25%, and that's primarily in the area of drilling services. In other words, they'll have a minority or a woman-owned firm do their drilling for them, and they'll do all the soils analysis required and oversee that work. Any questions on the geotechnical GSAs? All right, the next are the GSAs, or General Service Agreement for Survey Services. And again, on this particular case, we have 5 contracts, contracts A, B, C, D, and E. It authorizes the district to enter a contract with Civil Design Incorporated, Abnett Engineering Incorporated, Sabre Incorporated, the Sterling Company, and Heidemann and Associates. The services be provided include land surveys, property strip maps, easements for project to be completed either by in-house or design consultants. Additional general surveying services can be provided on an as-needed basis for legal research, legal descriptions, and topographic and land surveys. The work will be assigned on a project-by-project basis. This contract's for a maximum of $50,000. It's a 2-year contract, so it'll be $50,000 each year, so there's 1 option year. We did go out for proposals this year, so this is a new contract. We received a total of 7 proposals for this work, and we selected the 5 that I mentioned earlier. On our surveying services, since those are actually self-performed work, they're actually doing the project where they're actually doing the survey, there's no opportunity for subcontracting. But so what we do during the selection is we look at the overall number and try to make sure that we emphasize the selection of minority firms. In this particular case, the 5 firms mentioned, 2 of the firms are minority, and 1 of the firms is a woman-owned firm. So overall, with our surveying services, we're getting about 60% participation with our minority and women firms. So it's always been successful. Plus, a lot of these firms are same firms that our prime consultants utilize for their surveying services on their projects as well, and helps with our minority and women-owned companies. Any questions on the survey services? All right, just a couple more items. All right, the last two items are both surplus property that we require a resolution. These are properties the district over the years has purchased for some reason or another, whether it be flooding or the need to construct a sewer, things like that. We've completed our need of the specific properties. And in order to take those off the books, there's been some interest in these two properties by, say, adjoining properties. So in order for us to sell those properties or put them back on the market, the board has to approve them as surplus, and that allows us to market and sell those properties out of the district's property rolls. Just like we have to come to you to purchase a property, we have to come in order to get rid of them. So there's two such properties today, and I'll talk a little bit. The district has identified a section of real property located at 694244 Odell is no longer necessary or useful to the district's operation. Therefore, we are requesting to declare it as surplus property. This property is not being used by the district. The district has no plans to use the property, and declaring the surplus property will not interfere with the district's existing and reasonable anticipated uses. The property in Odell is located in Maplewood. It's along River to Pear. The district purchased the property in 2015. At that time in 2015, it's along River to Pear. We had a gate malfunction, which a number of homes were flooded. This one was flooded to the extent that it was a total loss. So the district ended up purchasing the property at the time. There are still existing homes in the neighborhood, so there's some interest to utilize that property. They wouldn't be able to build on it again. More likely would be using it for a garden or just additional yard. We deed restrict these properties. In other words, we place an easement over the whole property, which will prevent them from building on it again. So we won't have the flooding problem again. So that's the first property. The second property is at 613 Cleveland. That's in the city of Kirkwood. Again, we've identified the property to be declared surplus. The district has no use for this property. We actually purchased the property in 2008. It had persistent flooding at the property. It was located in a low spot between two other houses. If you look at the drawing, you'll see how tight it is there. In other words, there was area that the water came through, couldn't get between the houses, and basically since the house sat lower, it was flooding persistently. There wasn't a project that could be performed, and the best solution at that time was to buy the property. Now that property is sitting vacant, as opposed to having to maintain it. There is some interest. The adjoining property, again, it would be deed restricted, so nobody would be able to build on that, but it would have a use, and the district would no longer have to maintain that property. So those two items will be resolutions, basically, that you'll be approving to allow us to declare surplus, and then we'll market those properties. Any questions on those two? Okay, that concludes the engineering department agenda items that I have.
All right, thank you. Looks like we have a staff presentation on the letter to the board from October.
We do. I have Brad Nevoy here with me. He's my assistant director over the design group. So he'll be doing a portion of the presentation. You should have in front of you. I think you have it on your computer, and I think you've been given a hard copy. It says October 14th, letter to board, Hankin Environmental Services. Moving on to the first sheet, just some background. The district last month received a letter from a representative of Hankin Environmental Systems. The letter was concerning a recent denial of pre-qualification to supply and install equipment for our upcoming incinerator project. And since you may or may not heard anything on the incinerator project, I just want to give you a brief background of how we got here and what the project's about. The project is, it's a very significant project, so we wanted to provide the details. And I'm going to go over, Brad is going to cover the incinerator system supplier pre-qualification, which is what the letter's about. And from now on, I'm going to call it ISS, but I wanted to cover what that was. And the process we use it and some insight as to why we made the decision we did. We are not asking the board to make any action at this time. We simply want to inform you what the letter was about and what we did here internally to that. A little background on the project.
The system has detected that a minimum number of lines are connected to this conference.
Just hang that.
Yeah, I think we can hang it up.
Press 1 to con-
Apologize for that. Actually, this project goes back to 2011. The district needed to look at how we were handling solids, which is the afterthought of our treatment processes. In other words, what we do with those when we're done, it's a solid waste that we have to get rid of. In some cases, at some of our plants, we were doing land application of those solids. But primarily our getting rid of that is through the incineration process. And we have existing incinerators located at both our Limay and Bissell treatment plants that's existed over the years. And those particular incinerators are reaching the end of their useful life, and that kind of precipitated our study of this. So we wanted to look at what we were going to do at all of our plants, including Limay and Bissell. These are regional locations. In other words, we bring some of our sludge from our other plants to those locations for incineration. While we were doing that study in the early 2010s, the EPA, in the meantime, was coming up with new standards for the incinerators. In other words, the current incineration was multiple hearth incineration, but the emissions requirements of those had a different standard. So there was going to be moving to an upgrade of what those standards were, which required a new technology. It's called fluidized bed incinerator technology. So as we were preparing our study for that, to replace our multiple hearth incinerators with fluidized bed incinerators, we incorporated the new standards into our plan for that project. The plan was developed. We developed a schedule. It's about a $500 million project, and the timing for the project was going to be as such. In other words, it's in the process now, that was going to overlap with one of our largest CSO tunnel projects required by the consent decree. That's the Lower Middle River Repair Project. That's a $750 million project that we had planned, and they were both going to be on top of each other, and that wasn't going to work from a financial standpoint. It was going to create a spike in the rates from the 23 through 27 timeframe. So we went back to the EPA and requested that we could push out our consent decree so we could place this project and get it done and meet our regulations. In other words, we had our incinerators that were reaching the useful life. In addition, they weren't going to meet the regulation. So we needed to do that project. EPA was kind enough to allow us to do that in order to keep our rates at level. So we had an extension to our consent decree. And so that's kind of how we got to that particular project. I'm going to move on to the next slide, slide 3. After we did our planning, we decided to move forward with the project, and we're moving forward with the design build procurement. Design build is a process where the district will take the design to a preliminary stage, and then we will solicit design build teams, which will then are pre-qualified shortlists, and then we select a team that would take that design and actually finish the design and construct it. In other words, we select that team both on their technical capabilities to design and construct the facility, as well as their price. In other words, it takes both into a qualification and price component. That's coming up in the future, that selection process. The winning design build team then is contracted to complete the design and construction. The district is not actually designing the 30% plans that I talked about. We hired Black & Veatch to assist with that. This is a highly technical facility that is being done. Not many of them are done throughout the country. Black & Veatch has done a lot of these throughout the country. So we hired them to be our owner's representative. What they'll do is they'll design the plans, or they are right now, designing those plans to 30%, and then they'll oversee the project going forward during the future design and then through the construction. Then we refer to them as our owner's representative. When we first started the project, it's been going for about a year. We did considerable outreach, and Brad's going to talk a little bit more about that, to attract both incinerator suppliers, which is what Henkin is, and also design build teams. In other words, these are not facilities that get built on a regular basis, throughout. In other words, you're talking worldwide technology plus, United States. There's just not a lot of them. So we wanted to make sure we had the best and as many people that are competing for this project as we can. So we wanted to do a lot of outreach there. So the other thing we decided we wanted to do is we wanted to pre-qualify our ISS supplier. In other words, we have a $500 million project. The equipment for these incinerators that we're going to have at 2 locations, again, Brad's going to get in a little more detail, is a total of about $150 million that contract. And that system has to meet certain criteria with respect to EPA and meeting the regulations. So we want to make sure we had the right companies that were going to participate in the project. Ultimately, the pre-qualified contract or suppliers that we provide will then work with the design build teams that are interested in our project, and then they'll create themselves a team, and then they'll propose on the project itself, both for qualifications and for price. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Brad. He's going to discuss our ISS pre-qualification, provide some insight as to why Henkin was not pre-qualified, and how we got to the letter that they sent you. Are there any questions before I move to Brad? I was covering the project pretty quick, but it's a significant project for us. All right, Brad.
Good morning. As Rich mentioned, my name is Brad. I'm Assistant Director of Engineering and Design and a member of the selection committee that looked at the pre-qualification packages for this project. MSD has a long history with pre-qualification to determine if a company or a product has extensive enough experience on similar work, staff experience, previous performance, safety, financial strength, et cetera, in order to do work with MSD. The goal of pre-qualification is to ensure that an entity is capable of providing the scope of a project. Due to the size and complexity of the incinerator system supplier, the ISS that Rich mentioned, the ISS scope, a dedicated team of senior level engineering and operations personnel formed a selection committee to look at the qualification packages. The selection committee consisted of 3 assistant directors, including myself, Alan Mueller, Assistant Director of Engineering and Construction, Catherine Polite, Assistant Director of Operations over Facilities, as well as Becca Coyle, Operations Division Manager, and James Dunacek, who is the Program Manager over Capital Projects. A detailed request for qualifications, or RFQ, was established to gather and evaluate data on potential ISS providers. Both the Directors of Engineering and Operations, Rich Underfurth and Brett Berthold, both signed off on the results of this process. The entire process started with a significant effort to obtain interest in our project from not only ISS providers, but design build teams as well. From advertisements in national trade magazines to YouTube videos, we have tried hard to get the word out about our project. Only 2 companies showed a serious interest in submitting qualifications on the ISS scope. For the ISS RFQ, the outreach culminated with a kickoff meeting that coincided with the advertisement of the RFQ in March. I'm moving to slide 6. As mentioned, MSD issued a request for qualifications back in March through our purchasing group. The selection committee reviewed the submittals, and the proposers were notified of the results in June. Hankin appealed the results to our purchasing group and then to our executive director per our appeal policy. The executive director then asked the committee to look at all additional information submitted with previous appeals and solicit more information to clarify Hankin's experience. Even though all of this information was submitted well after the proposal deadline, it was still considered in our evaluation. That information was reviewed by the selection committee under the same process discussed before, and Hankin again was not recommended for pre-qualification. A final appeal was denied by the executive director, and then the board received a letter at its October meeting. I'm going to slide 7 now. Some basic facts about the ISS scope. As Rich mentioned, this is a large project being done at 2 of our largest treatment plants as part of one project assignment. The equipment and the installation is integral to the success of this project. Any ISS provider will be a key team member on the design build teams proposing. This is really a $150 million scope for the ISS provider inside of an overall $500 million project. So how did the selection committee come up with their recommendation? As I mentioned, due to the size and complexity of the project, a selection committee of high-level engineering and operations employees performed a careful, deliberate review process. We reviewed Hankin's information carefully on 2 separate occasions. Each member individually reviewed and scored Hankin's proposal, and then the committee met to discuss the results. MSD gave Hankin every opportunity to provide as much information on its capabilities as possible. After careful review, it was a unanimous decision of the committee that Hankin lacked the experience and capability to serve as an ISS provider on this project. I'm moving to slide 8 then. Here's a summary that we put together of the experience that was presented. Each of the bars that you see on the graph here represent a project that one of the various companies worked on. Here on this chart, Hankin's experience is represented in red, and as an industry reference, I have included experience of the pre-qualified ISS provider, Suez, in green, along with MSD's project scope in the blue bars to the right. The axis on the left is dry tons per day. This is a good measure of the size of the equipment that we're going to ask to be installed. Across the bottom is time. So from 1987 up to present, it shows where these projects were constructed. Again, the bars shown in red are Hankin's previous experience, green is Suez's experience, and blue is the scope of MSD's 2 plants as laid out in the RFQ. So for example, our Lime treatment plant needs units to come up with the equivalent of 160 dry tons per day. And at our Bissell plant, we need 240 dry tons per day, as you can see with the blue bars. To be clear, this graph represents all the projects that the companies presented information on, both retrofits and new installs. We did not set a time range limit on the information to be submitted. Hankin gave us projects all the way back to 1987. Suez limited their information back to 2004. We did establish a requirement in the RFQ to demonstrate experience with new FBI installations greater than 40 dry tons per day per train or per unit. Please note the bars with the arrows above them. The arrows point to the new installations for each company that met this 40 dry ton per day requirement. I'm moving on to slide 9 now. Now here's a very similar graph to the last one, but this is only of the arrow projects. This graph represents only those new installations that were responsive to meeting the size requirements laid out in the RFQ. This chart is very similar to the last, but now the axis on the left is dry tons per day per train or per unit. These project solutions are somewhat scalable. MSD's project actually requires 80 dry ton per day incinerator units or trains, shown by the blue lines or blue bars on the right. The size of the units required is dictated by the ability to turn on or off units, to ramp up or down, depending on the amount of sewage being treated at a given time, as well as maintenance schedules and the ability to remain efficient with the units. In our case, we wanted uniformity across the two plants, having 80 dry ton per day units at each plant. Our project actually requires 5 units or trains at 80 dry tons per day each. 3 at our Bissell plant are 3 times 80, which gets us to that 240 dry tons per day I showed you earlier. And 2 at our Limay plant are 2 times 80 at the 160 dry tons per day that I showed on the previous graph. The 40 dry tons per day per train requirement that was put in the RFQ was to determine if the company had the capability of meeting MSD's project demands. The black horizontal line on the graph above shows that the minimum experience requirement as laid out in the RFQ. This requirement of 40 dry tons per day per train is only half of the unit sizes needed by MSD for its project. Again, which is designated by the blue horizontal line above. Again, the bars shown in red are Hankins' previous experience, and for reference, the green bars are Suez's experience, along with the blue bars showing the size requirements at MSD's 2 plants laid out in the RFQ. Hankin provided information that met this basic requirement of 40 dry tons per day over the last 25 years, shown here in red. For reference, Suez provided information on 13 new installs greater than the 40 dry tons per day per train requirement since 2004, shown in green. It should also be noted that none of Hankin's information showed that they have experience meeting the new EPA emission standard for new installations. Again, as a reference of the industry, Suez provided information on 4 projects on which they met the new EPA emission standard for new installations. This experience is essential for MSD's project. That's really what this whole project is about, is installing new incinerators that meet the new emission standard. The selection committee took their assignment very seriously to ensure that the public gets a quality product. There was a lot of detail in my information, and I appreciate your time. I'm going to turn it back over to Rich to wrap things up.
Okay, again, there's no action required by the board. And before we go into closed session, Brad and I are free to answer any of your questions that you may have. Again, we've covered a lot of information. You can ask questions on the project, our process that we went through, and the decision we made, and we're happy to answer this. And again, from a staff's perspective, we're really recommending that we continue on with our procurement process and move on to our design build team selection on the project.
I have two questions. Can you refresh our recollection, Rich, about what were they claiming in their letter to the board? Just that our selection process was sort of arbitrary? Is that what they were claiming?
Yeah, they're protesting the fact that we determined that they were not qualified to do the work. In other words, during our pre-qualification process, we felt like they did not meet the qualifications we feel are necessary to do the project.
But what are they saying? Did they meet the qualifications?
Yes.
And that our process was
Correct.
arbitrary?
Yes.
Okay. And then what are they threatening, if anything?
They, I'll let you take this one.
Are they asking us to do something, or
well, they're obviously asking to be pre-qualified. They had indicated that, the representative indicated that if they're not, they do plan on drawing this out legally, forcing us to spend monies. And they indicated by phone that they need to stop Suez from winning these projects. This is the other company. That's the only insight I can give you, I think, outside of what was in writing. So I think, and we'll have a little discussion about this, I think they they don't plan on this, their indication, the communication so far is they don't plan on this being the end of this process as far as they're concerned. And we will have a closed session after this to kind of go over some of the legal parts of that.
I just didn't have the letter in front of me, and it would be helpful to look at that.
Yes, matter of fact, we'll, okay.
We could get that before.
Yeah, we can get it
closed
before
session.
closed session,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Is this question more appropriate for the closed session? But you indicated in your review notes that their proposal was incomplete. And nothing popped out past that.
You want me to answer that, Brian?
Yeah, go ahead. Or should we wait?
So the original submittal that was turned in by the due date was missing several things that we had asked for.
Okay.
One of the main one thing, they failed to provide the resume of their project manager, which was something we wanted to see. The information on their experience was somewhat lacking. We gathered more information in our ultimate review, the second review.
Okay.
From their appeals, they submitted a bunch of extra stuff, and we also solicited more information as well.
So they, basically, I would say, we tended to see the original submission as non-responsive.
Yeah, if this had been part of a real selection process for an actual vendor that we were going to contract with, they may have been found non-responsive for simply not submitting information.
But we allowed them extra time.
So on their appeal, I took a look, and because of what this process was, I told the staff, even though all the information was submitted after the due date, they put extra information in their appeals, and I said, please consider everything and ask for any additional information, and let's make sure we give them every opportunity to submit everything they want, even though they were after the due date that was in the original proposal.
Am I correct that the letter came from, and I'm working off my memory, but it came from an attorney, he was a former member of the board?
John Goffstein.
Yeah, the letter was forwarded to John Goffstein, is one of the attorneys that's representing, I think in joint, they're representing Hankin, and they're also representing the local vendor who markets this equipment, which would be Ken Ressler with Ressler and Associates. If there's nothing else, we do have the closed session side of this discussion. Chairman Evans, if you think it's appropriate now to do that.
You have a motion to go to closed session?
So moved.
Hey, well, let's do sunshine law, we do a roll call vote. So just to be clear, the motion is to go into closed session to discuss legal, confidential, or privileged matters under 610-021-1. We'll do a roll call vote. Trustee Wabi?
Aye.
Trustee Watson?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Fair?
Yes.
Trustee Evans?
Yes.
All right, we are in closed session.
You guys shut down.
Back streaming, is there a motion to come out of closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor? All right, we are back in open session. I don't remember who is leading this meeting already.
I was. Next meeting scheduled for Tuesday, November 30. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.